Do you trust the history books? Because I sure don't. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but the one thing I know about history is the winners write history. What if I told you that a massive, highly advanced empire known as Tartaria once existed? This empire is one of the most massive empires in history, however, we're not taught about it in school. But there are some pretty big clues showing that this empire existed, including old world maps, poetry, literature. For example, here's an old world map, I believe it's from like the 18th century, and it shows the Grand Tartarian Empire. Here is a British table of flags from the 18th century, showing the flag of Tartaria. Now the question remains, what happened to this empire? Well, due to some type of cataclysm, this empire was destroyed and taken over, and its history erased from the history books. However, some of their structures remain throughout the world. However, we're told that these buildings and structures were built by the people in the countries. For example, there are similar structures and buildings found throughout the world. However, much of these buildings were destroyed. You also can find similar statues found throughout the world. Here's one example of highly advanced Tartarian architecture. This is the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg. Now, the narrative that we're given is that Peter the Great built it in the 18th century. Now, what I notice about this building is that it appears to be buried slightly. Apparently, the narrative we're told is that this is just the style of the old world. That when countries would build these grand palaces and structures, they just had windows buried underneath or buildings buried halfway. Here are interesting looking statues found at that museum. But yeah, this is the narrative we're told. Apparently, past cultures just enjoyed building structures halfway underground, hiding windows. Here's a photograph of San Francisco. Now, it doesn't look like they're constructing that building. In fact, it looks like they're excavating it. I mean, just look at the roads around. They're just dirt. Here's an interesting photo of the construction of the Iowa State Capitol. Do you guys notice anything weird about this picture? Well, what I noticed is when constructing something, usually people level the ground and they get rid of the trees around. It looks like the building is buried. Here's more examples of similar Tartarian-looking architecture in America, the Capitol. Now, as they're digging down, there doesn't appear to be any foundation, but more building, buried deep below the ground. This is another building in St. Petersburg. Again, why does it seem like the building is buried underground? I guess people just love burying the buildings halfway underground. Here's another building in St. Petersburg. Again, look at the windows. They're like halfway buried. Here's a building in India. Another building in St. Petersburg. I believe this building is in New York. Again, it looks like it's buried underground. And it was just cemented. Here's a zoomed out picture. It's as if we're building on top of a civilization that once existed. Here's the Palace of Versailles in France. Again, looks Tartarian. Beautiful golden gates, beautiful architecture. Here's the old San Francisco Capitol. Apparently it was destroyed by an earthquake. Yeah, crazy stuff. There's also literature talking about Tartaria. If I were Lord of Tartary, myself and me alone, my bed should be made of ivory, of beaten gold my throne. And in my court should peacocks flaunt, and in my forest tigers haunt, and in my pools great fishes slaunt their fins athwart the sun.